What's up, everyone? Alex here. Why don't you pull up a chair? I have a short story to tell you. Once upon a time, there was a child who had the biggest of dreams. They dreamt of becoming a hero that vanquished evil in many realms. And for a time, they did, felling their foes and overcoming huge hardships, all the while winning the adoration of the masses. One day, the child grew older and realized that evil existed in many forms. These evils made the child feel smaller than they were, as it boasted its triumphs with its malevolent voice. And yet, despite their dastardly put-downs, the child, now much older, still yearned to recapture those same feelings of dashing heroism and cotton candy-colored dreams that they'd grown up with. Thus, they embarked on a quest to seek out that inner child, which has led them to this moment in time. If this story resonated with you in any way at all, then I think you'll love this next tale that I'm about to talk about. This tale is called The Cruel King and the Great Hero, a story that's as much about growing up as it is overcoming the unknown. The Cruel King and the Great Hero is a classic turn-based Japanese-style RPG presented as a storybook fairy tale, developed by NIS and published by NIS America, who sent over this PS4 review code. It is the follow-up to The Liar Princess and The Blind Prince, and can be played independently of said game. You play the role of you, a young girl with dreams of becoming a brave and noble hero. Yu has lived with her dad, the Dragon King, since she was little, with bedtime stories of her long-departed papa serving as her inspiration for becoming a hero. As Yu journeys further and further away from the safety of her dad's domain, she'll befriend both monsters and humans alike, as she slowly learns more about what happened to her papa, as well as how her dad started taking care of her while she was just a baby. I remember seeing the artwork for this game and I was just completely enraptured by it. And when you get your hands on The Cruel King and the Great Hero, just playing it feels like being wrapped in a comfortable, warm hug. This is because of its storybook presentation style, which has clean colored illustrations depicting its characters and backgrounds, alongside rough penciled sketches that give the game a very charming and inviting feeling. And what's really cool about this too is that it gives the game a unique identity, and further reinforces the thematics of the game extremely well. That being said, the game only features Japanese voice acting. And while I don't understand Japanese all that well, the sole voice that serves as the narrator and the voices of the entire cast just feels inviting, soft, soothing, calming, and very appropriate for the mood that they're trying to convey. Because the game's narrative and everything else around it, it's never really meant to alarm or shock anyone, but it's more meant to lull the audience into a sense that everything's going to be alright. While I certainly didn't mind the Japanese voice acting, and this is not really a complaint, so please don't take it that way, I think it would have been nice to actually have English voice acting for this game, because this has all the makings of a great first RPG that can be played by a younger audience. And given that it's only one narrator, it kind of doesn't make sense to not go one step further in order to make this game accessible to a broader audience. In addition to its visual style and the Japanese voice acting, the music is very whimsical and very charming. It definitely feels very different than a lot of JRPGs out there where there's a lot of really dire circumstances and you can feel it with their presentation. And the music kind of reinforces that sort of feeling as well for those games. And the music in this game really feels like it just makes everything feel much lighter and makes the game feel more approachable as a result. The Cruel King and the Great Hero's RPG mechanics are pretty simple, in that you have an HP bar, or a stamina meter as they call it here, or an MP or energy bar, which replenishes 1 point every turn. There are no turn order indications at all. It's all based on your speed and agility and whatnot. But the gameplay does have some depth in that there are abilities that can target rows and columns. but of course it's based off of the party member you currently have in your party. All that said, getting in and out of combat feels quite fast. So if you want to kind of get through a whole bunch of battles back to back, it's not going to be a big deal because it doesn't load that long. The game also has a very basic equipment and accessory system, with its accessories used to plug up any potential weaknesses for upcoming battles and tasks. With the presentation reeling you in and kind of enveloping you in the world, you would think that this game is pretty much close to perfect, and I think you'd be right, depending on what you're looking for in RPGs. For one, as a general rule, you cannot run while in areas where the enemies are more powerful than her. But of course, when she returns to older areas at a higher level, it's only then that the game allows you to run faster. Now, running while exploring does not guarantee that you will avoid fights, it just lowers the random encounter rate, but there are long stretches in later areas that just don't contain anything of note, save for the random encounters to break up the monotony. And couple that with the inability to run, and you can kind of see why this might become tedious. And this wouldn't normally be a bother, but later areas usually tie these long corridors with high random encounter rates. Now, speaking from my experience early on, I decided not to run and engage into battles. But due to how simple the mechanics are and how often I ran into battle, it severely affected the pace of my gameplay and getting to the next story beat, artificially creating unnecessary padding that would be better served to advance the story if the said areas were made smaller. In that sense, I found myself running away from battle in later sections, but there are just times that you just can't, and they force you into combat. Admittedly, this might be my fault because I decided early on to run into every single battle and fight every single battle, and of course I found this to be a fool's errand much later on, given how aggressive the random encounters became. But I mention it here as a warning to anyone in case someone else does something similar to me. Now, this isn't really a negative for me, but I do need to mention that any folks looking for a challenge might want to look elsewhere. This is a game that is all about capturing a specific feeling and evoking and iterating on that feeling, which means the challenge is really the lowest in its priority list. That being said, there is decent enough challenge in the game that is moderately easy enough to figure out what to do at any given time. And I should also add that there are no difficulty settings for this game. Despite all what I said though, the presentation and the story do a fantastic job of really lifting this entire experience and making your journey all worth it. Before I talk about my spoiler-free thoughts of the story, I do want to caution anyone who wants to do further research on this game to avoid viewing the trailers and, more importantly, to avoid going to the official website. The entire backstory between Papa and Dad is revealed in the story tab on the official website. So there's literally massive spoilers just in the open right there. I came upon this while procuring assets for this review, and I'm really thankful that I'd already finished the game at that point. Now, it wouldn't be an RPG if it didn't depict any sort of peril or danger, or if there wasn't any sort of conflict. And I think what's really cool about this game is that while it does have moments of peril, it doesn't really go out of its way to make it dark. It manages to balance some sinister sounding things and lifting these parts with more uplifting moments and of course its presentation, which really does a great job. I mean, I've already said it enough times, but I want to stress it again, like the presentation does a lot of heavy lifting. The story winds up feeling like a modern fairy tale, and it feels light, fluffy, like a churro. I know that that's a weird comparison, but that's the first thing that came into my mind. That being said, it still manages to have some really good twists and turns without pushing it to something far too bleak or even too sweet, although it does lean on the sweet side to kind of lift everything up. And I will say that as someone who has experienced a lot of RPG stories before, you might know what's about to happen, and it becomes very easy to underestimate this sort of narrative and especially how light everything feels. But I can assure you that that's not the case here. Not everything you see is what it seems. Talking about the characters, I personally love the depictions of you and the Dragon King and just their relationship, and I could immediately feel that they both love and care for each other very much. The Dragon King loves her so much that he's always ever present in the background, helping you with her heroic powers whenever he's able. And again, this might be more of a presentational aspect, but this sort of small detail lends itself to the lightness and airiness of the story, and it always puts a smile on my face every time I see Dad in the background helping out you. It's just so magical. Also, I love that the side quests are called Use Acts of Kindness. This small semantic term change from side quests to this new one does a lot to reinforce the type of feeling that the game wants you to come away with. As in, they want you to come away feeling the love and care that both you and Dad have for each other and everyone around them, extending and breaking beyond the fourth wall so that you can be enveloped and embraced into these warm feelings. When I think about The Cruel King and The Great Hero, I think about a game that is quite possibly one of the most unique RPG experiences I've had this year. The RPG systems might be simple and the encounter rate might even feel a little too high, especially later on, but the experience that you get is a heartwarming and endearing tale about the families we choose and how simple acts of kindness can change the whole world for the better. And if I can be real for a moment, despite us living in a world held captive by doom scrolling, The Cruel King and The Great Hero reminds us that we need not see everything in such a negative light, and that with the right perspective and extending acts of kindness here and there, that we can begin to write our own stories of heroism that ripples across the people and the world around us. It's this optimistic view of the world that's at the heart of why I love this game, and it is a must-play for anyone wanting to rekindle their inner child. Thanks for watching my review of The Cruel King and The Great Hero. Have you heard of this game before? Have you played this game already? Post your thoughts in the comments below and let's talk about it. And if you love RPGs, Japanese games, indies, niche titles, and more, consider subscribing to the channel for future coverage. And if you've been a longtime subscriber, join the $5 tier on Patreon to gain early access to my videos at patreon.com/backlogbattle. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.